The rain had been falling since early morning. Not the gentle kind that cleans the air, but the heavy, relentless downpour that turns streets into shallow rivers and gutters into roaring channels. By late morning, the sky over the small suburban neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio, was a uniform gray, low and oppressive, as if the clouds themselves were pressing down on the roofs and sidewalks below. Daniel Harper had lived on Maplewood Drive for almost 15 years. At 42, he considered himself observant in the quiet way that long-term neighbors often are. Someone who noticed when a porch light stayed on too long, or when a mailbox began to overflow. That day, working from home due to the storm, he stood at his front window with a mug of cooling coffee, watching water rush along the curb like something alive. That was when he heard it. At first, Daniel thought it was the wind. Then he assumed it was metal shifting under the pressure of water, the storm drain at the corner of the block struggling to keep up. But the sound came again, thin, strained, and unmistakably desperate. A cry. Daniel set the mug down slowly. He opened the front door, letting the smell of wet asphalt and rain-soaked grass wash over him. The sound was faint, nearly swallowed by the rain, but now that he was listening for it, he could hear it clearly. A weak, trembling whimper rising from somewhere below street level. "Hello?" he called out, his voice feeling foolish against the roar of rainfall. The whimper answered. Daniel pulled on a rain jacket and jogged toward the corner. Water soaked his shoes almost instantly. He crouched beside the storm drain, gripping the slick metal bars, and peered into the darkness beneath the street. Another cry echoed upward. "Oh no," he breathed. Down inside the drain, far beyond where daylight could reach, something was alive and barely holding on. Daniel's heart began to pound. The storm drain wasn't deep like a sewer tunnel, but it was long, narrow, and already half filled with rushing water. Anything trapped down there would have been fighting exhaustion, cold, and panic for hours. He shouted for help, but the street was empty. Most neighbors were indoors, sheltering from the weather. Daniel pulled out his phone and dialed emergency services, his voice tight as he explained what he was hearing. "There's an animal trapped in a storm drain," he said. "I think it's a puppy. It's still alive, but it sounds weak." The first rescue truck arrived 20 minutes later, its lights flashing red against the gray morning. Daniel waved frantically as two firefighters stepped out, rain dripping from their helmets. "Right here," he said, leading them to the drain. "You can hear it." They crouched low, listening. One of them, a woman with a calm, focused expression, nodded grimly. "That's a puppy," she said, "and it's in trouble." They radioed for additional support. Water rescue protocols weren't usually designed for animals, but no one hesitated. The rain had turned the storm drain into a moving channel, and time was working against them. When animal control arrived, followed by a technical rescue unit, the small corner of Maplewood Drive transformed into a coordinated effort. Neighbors began to emerge from their houses, umbrellas blooming along the sidewalk, drawn by the flashing lights and hushed urgency. Inside the drain, the puppy's cries were now intermittent. Each one sounded thinner than the last. "We need to go in," said Mark Alvarez, the senior rescue technician on site. At 38, he had spent most of his career responding to car accidents, floods, and collapsed structures. This, however, made his chest ache in a different way. He suited up quickly, securing a harness and headlamp. The drain opening was narrow, slick with algae and rainwater. As he lowered himself inside, cold water immediately soaked his gloves and boots. "Easy, buddy," Mark called out, his voice echoing through the tunnel. "I'm coming." The light from his headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing rushing water, debris, and finally, a small trembling shape pressed against the side of the drain. The puppy was no more than a few months old. His fur, once light-colored, was matted dark with water and grime. One ear lay flat against his head, the other twitched weakly. His ribs were visible beneath soaked skin, and his paws were scraped raw from trying to climb smooth concrete. When the puppy saw the light, he lifted his head slightly and let out one last sound. A broken, exhausted whine. Mark swallowed hard. "I've got you," he said softly. Reaching for the puppy wasn't easy. The water surged unpredictably, and the drain offered little space to maneuver. Mark moved slowly, inch by inch, afraid that a sudden motion might send the puppy slipping further down. The puppy didn't resist. He didn't have the strength. Mark wrapped him carefully in a thermal blanket, cradling the small body against his chest. The puppy shivered violently, his heart fluttering beneath Mark's glove. "Coming out," Marco radioed. When he emerged from the drain, soaked and shaking, the crowd exhaled as one. Someone gasped. Someone else wiped away tears. The puppy was rushed into a waiting vehicle, where a veterinary technician began immediate care. Warm towels, gentle hands, a soft voice repeating the same words over and over. "You're safe now. You're safe." At the emergency veterinary clinic, the diagnosis was grim but hopeful. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, exhaustion. No broken bones, no internal bleeding, but he was right on the edge. They placed him in a warming unit, monitored his breathing, and administered fluids. The puppy drifted in and out of consciousness, his small body finally allowed to rest. Daniel visited that evening, standing quietly behind the glass, watching the puppy sleep. "I almost didn't hear him," Daniel admitted to the vet. "If I'd had my headphones on, if I'd ignored it." "But you didn't," the vet said gently. "That's what matters." Over the next few days, the puppy fought his way back with quiet determination. He learned to drink again, then to eat. His eyes, once dull and unfocused, began to track movement. His tail gave a tentative wag for the first time. The staff needed a name for his chart, Hope. The name fit without discussion. Hope was transferred to a local animal rescue once he stabilized. There, surrounded by blankets and patient volunteers, he began to trust the world again. He startled at loud noises. He flinched at rushing water. But he also leaned into gentle touches, his body remembering kindness. Volunteers spoke to him softly. They sat with him during storms. They let him choose the pace. Day by day, Hope grew stronger. Part 3. Named Hope, chosen for home. 900 words, including final 150-word slow ending. Weeks passed, and Hope changed in ways both subtle and profound. His coat grew clean and soft again, a warm cream color that caught the light when he moved. His eyes, once clouded with fear, now held curiosity. He learned the rhythm of shelter life, the sound of keys, the scent of treats, the comfort of routine. Yet some things lingered. During heavy rain, Hope would pause, ears flattening, his body tensing as if bracing for something unseen. Volunteers noticed and responded instinctively, sitting with him, grounding him in the present. "You're here, Deadly," they would murmur. "You're safe." Hope learned to believe them. The day the Reynolds family walked into the shelter was unremarkable in every visible way. A normal Saturday, overcast but calm. Two parents, a 10-year-old boy named Ethan, and the quiet 8-year-old girl named Lucy. They weren't looking for a story. They were looking for a companion. Hope watched them from his kennel, tail wagging cautiously. When Lucy knelt down, meeting his eyes, something shifted. She didn't reach through the bars. She didn't speak right away. She just sat. Hope stepped forward on his own. The adoption counselor noticed immediately. "That one's special," she said. "He's been through a lot." The meet and greet was gentle. Hope sniffed, leaned, sat, then finally rested his head on Lucy's knee. The decision was made without words. When Hope left the shelter, he carried no possessions. Just a collar, a leash, and a name that had already shaped his future. At his new home, Hope learned grass that wasn't soaked, floors that were warm, and nights that ended in sleep rather than fear. He chose his favorite spot near the window, where daylight filtered in softly. Rain still fell sometimes. When it did, Lucy sat beside him, and Hope stayed. There are lives that slip quietly through the cracks, small, voiceless, easy to miss. And there are moments, ordinary and unremarkable on the surface, when someone chooses to listen instead of turning away. Hope's story wasn't about heroics. It was about attention, about compassion arriving not loudly, but in time. From a cold, rushing darkness beneath a street to the steady warmth of a family's home, his journey was shaped by people who refused to ignore a fragile sound asking to be heard. How many lives, human or otherwise, are waiting in silence for someone to notice? How often does rescue begin with nothing more than stopping, listening, and caring? And if you heard a cry today, would you pause long enough to answer it?